Good morning and welcome to Inside Texas Football, powered by InsideTexas.com. I'm here with Eric Nalin, and we're just taking our Saturday to talk to you a little bit about some portal news. Not necessarily news in terms of players going this way and that, but we've just wrapped up I guess, would you call it? Do you call it the winter portal or
I just call it the winter window. I call it the winter window, spring window.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. So we just finished up the winter window, as it were. And there's obviously a lot of movement going on. Teams that were in the playoffs had different opportunities, maybe just because of their schedule as things were going through. And I know that you had an opportunity to chat with someone close with the program. And there are, just like with the college football playoff, we've experienced it now. We've got some data points. And maybe we might want to start making some adjustments. And I'm just curious, as we talk about maybe what are some of the solves for these issues, I think it would be good to just bring people up to speed on what the issues are right now. What are the pressure points that are creating some challenges for programs?
Yeah, I mean, the playoffs are a big mess. I've been hunting down people and getting information on that as well. It's just my notes are a total mess. I should have gone to law school to figure all this out. Yeah, I mean, the same issues that came to bear a couple of years ago are the same ones where, kids have too much freedom to move at differing times. There's too much tampering. And there's unlimited money. Now that's about to change with the House ruling, but going into effect in June, I believe. That's going to change a lot of things about NIL. But yeah, the amount of movement and the money being thrown around makes it impossible to keep your roster together. Now, you said that the portal window is closed. That's technically correct for exports.
Right.
Texas could still add some players. There's still guys in the portal that haven't found homes. There's still the possibility that Ohio State and Notre Dame will lose players. They'll have a 5-day window that opens after the game on Monday. And then, of course, you could have a grad transfer go in at any time, which Texas might have interest in. Or you could have a different coaching search or a coaching move, and then a 30-day window opens up for that poor program. So Texas might – the good thing is they got out of this week unscathed outside of Amari Niblack, which, that was kind of a hit or miss. You didn't know whether or not he was going to stay. It was a wild week. I think the main problem is that it's going to ruin the game for it's already ruining the game for some fans, not all of them. I mean, it doesn't really bother me. I'm glad to have stuff to write about. I'm glad that we have stuff to talk about on, January 18th.
Right.
And I think it adds a lot of intrigue. It's a way for Texas to improve the program in short time. That's what, if you look at the Arizona State game, 5 of the most important players on the game came from the portal for Texas. Matthew Golden, Quinn Ewers, of course. But yeah, the big problem is that there's no stability. It's a quite unstable environment. The coaches are working way too many hours. I don't care what they're paid. There's going to be somebody say, "Well, pay me $10 million, I'll do it." You wouldn't be good at it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be good at it.
That's a fair point. Yeah,
it's going to burn out guys. You've already heard about. I've already had some donors tell me, man, they'll be lucky to keep soccer around if they keep having weeks like this. So really, they just need more stability. I think stability is going to come. Or at least budgeting is going to come. I think you've got that as one of your headers. The House, the House decision coming to bear in June it's going to add more problems. Of course, now we're going to bring in Title IX into the factor. But what's going to happen is schools are going to have $18 to $20 million to spend on all student athletes, and the variance in 18 to 20 is based on amount of scholarships within the athletics department. And it's up to them to figure out how to parcel that money out from the House decision. So this thing is it's a huge mess. And I'll tell you this, I've got people who would normally not go to the federal government for help are thinking that's the only way to fix this issue is to get sort of unanimity across the board. And NCAA is obviously not the body to get that done.
Well, one of the things also that you mentioned, just in terms of like all of the confusion going on, especially if we just go back to the transfer portal a second, leagues also have separate rules. Like the SEC has a separate rule on where those kids can transfer versus like a Big Ten school or even a Pac or a Big 12 school.
That's a question we get often. A lot of fans get confused by it. So in the winter window, you can have interconference SEC transferring. In the spring window, you cannot. And the reason that was put into place was to put an end to tampering, which I guess it kind of did in that way. They made a hard rule on that. But of course, there was a whole lot of SEC tampering going on, as you can imagine. well before NIL even came around. So
I think it's a good sign. It's a good indicator that the SEC got ahead of this, and they're like, you know what? Sometimes we don't know. There might be tampering. We have obviously no history with this or understanding of it, but let's go ahead and nail that in the butt. So one of the other things that you talked about with one of your sources was the idea of, so let's say we do get the opportunity to, whether it's legislative or these teams come to, or these leagues rather come together and form some sort of alliance in terms of rules. One of the things that has been talked about, and I know that this is a major pushing point, especially with the coaches because of the schedule, is the idea of having one transfer window. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, that would be Texas's preference. So let me say this. This is probably burying the lead. Texas hates everything about the current climate, other than the fact that players are getting paid. They're all on board with that. They're perfectly fine with it. They're happy. They think they deserve it. That's unequivocal. They're all good with that. Outside of that, they hate everything else about it going on. So yeah, the preference is one window after the season completes, and I think they should advance the season start the season a little earlier and end it a little sooner, because again, we still have to acknowledge that there's college to go to. They have to attend classes, and so you have to have this window in place early enough for people to not only enter the portal but also find a home and then get enrolled in their new school in time. So I think the problem with the season ending so late is it also conflicts with the spring semester. So that's a problem. But yeah, the preference is to only have one window. And I laughed at this when I heard this, but one window with no contact until the player is in the portal. And of course, there's so much plausible deniability with agents. That's maybe the player, the school didn't contact the player, but some liaison for the school contacted an agent. It's the same exact thing.
Well, I mean, and that's the other thing. I mean, the idea of tampering, now that you have agents in the game, an agent's job is to talk to other agents. I mean, that's what they do. So
Right.
I mean, that's all behind the scenes. That's happening constantly. I mean,
Sure.
I think
that's a benefit for Texas too. So it's going to be it was terrible this go around when Texas is running around with their heads cut off trying to get all these players locked in. The guy, so many schools are going after. Everybody talks about, Oregon's going after Malik Muhammad as an example, because they got Jabbar Muhammad, and Oregon's come after Jahdae Barron and Xavier Worthy in the past. Man, it's way more than that. I mean, Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, Ryan Wingo, all those guys were getting schools or interest, I should say, in quotations, from schools all over the country, upwards of 15. So let's just not just blame Oregon. Now, the good thing is on the agent side, you can kind of just, wave cash in the general direction of them to hint at them that, hey, we've got some needs at, entering the spring if you're Texas. So it's a double-edged sword for Texas, and you've got to play by the rules that are in place. Otherwise, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage.
one of the things that often gets maybe conflated or confused in this is the idea that you just described. Okay, the schools are going to have a fixed budget, but does that hinder a Quinn Ewers or an Ant Hill from, doing some car ads?
No, not at all. So the Quinn Ewers Dr. Pepper ad is perfectly on the level. There will be there's going to ideally or eventually there's going to be a body that sort of determines, is this an actual fair market value deal, or is it, you just drove one nail at a Habitat Humanity rebuild and you got 50K. That's not going to work. But a Dr. Pepper ad, yeah, that's perfectly fine, and that will be something that remains to Texas's advantage in the market of Austin, and the profile of the program. You always talk about, really the only, no offense to the soccer team, I'm drawing a blank on their name, which kind of proves the point. They're really the professional franchise in Austin, so that would not preclude players from getting real deals.
And this also goes part and parcel with the idea, or rather the concept of collectives up until this point. So where do you see collectives going? Are they going to exist anymore? And when you say that the program isn't happy with the state of things, how does that include the collectives, and where do you see that going?
Well, I don't want to talk about other schools. I don't know nearly as much as I know at Texas. I know a lot of collectives are actually fighting the direction, which, self-preservation and all that.
Sure.
We've known for a long time that Texas is rolling its collective infrastructure into the athletic department. Hopefully they keep a lot of the same people in place. a lot of the representatives for the collective obviously are not school employees, but they're well-established businessmen that know how to negotiate and get deals done. I think that Texas is. You can talk about who the best money spenders have been on NIL, and Texas would probably be top 5. But when it comes to actually running the foundation of it, the business side of it, I think they're by far the tops in the country. So they need to keep those people in place, or at least have those people offering oversight. But I'm not too worried about that being rolled into the athletic department. It'll probably make things a little bit more streamlined, and I don't know if I want to say it more organized, because you're still rolling a private group into a bureaucracy. But I think it can work, because I think they're already kind of working hand in hand in a number of ways.
The as we move through this, and I think there's obviously a lot of things in play. How do you see this actually playing out? And I obviously don't expect you to have a hard
in a courtroom,
right? So this is probably where it's going to go, because of all of the things that we just discussed. There's not that uniformity that goes through every league, through every team, and there are just enough nuances in there to create an element of chaos and an element of advantage. So, so this is probably going to court.
You've got some people I talk to think, they don't think federal legislation is going to come save the day. And I know some other people, and these are brilliant people on both sides and in both positions of power. And the other one will say, well, it's probably the only way. And we're actually nearing a time where it could actually happen.
Sure.
Just we don't want to get into politics, but the political tailwinds are sort of in the favor of getting something solved on this end. But there are just so many different, and you talk about, it kind of ties into, the future direction of playoffs and all that. I don't want to get off topic, but it's all kind of,
it's all the same. It all connects.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's like that ball of Christmas lights that Clark hands Rusty and tells him to unwind it. It is just it's a mess. So I think, and you talk about how it's, you got all these different competing interests. It's kind of why we have a United States federal government in the first place, is to streamline things. Not that it always works, but I think that might be the best thing. But there's so many different, you got Title IX that you have to address. You've got potentially collective bargaining, which, that would, one school could do collective bargaining and it wouldn't affect Texas. Really, the only thing that would affect Texas is the federal legislation mandated. So it's, whether that's good or bad. Right now, Texas would not have it. I don't even think it's legal in some instances. So, yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a whole lot of things to account for. But I think there's some easy things they could do to fix the portal that would probably still end up in court. Would be having a 2-year commitment between the player and school would be better for both parties. Gives the school stability. And I think players all too often give up on themselves, or they commit to this first school for the wrong reasons. This would kind of force them to commit to this first school for the right reasons. I use Ryan Wingo as a very good example of a kid that committed to school for the right reasons. But look at how many 5-stars left the school, or elite players left after 1 year, and you never hear from them again.
Right.
So I think too often we bend to the whims of the kid, and it's not good for them. At some point you have to do what's best for them. So I think a 2-year commitment would be doable. What else did I have on there? There's another one. My brain's kind of racing a little bit here.
Oh yeah, I think the thing that
one portal window and 2-year obligation. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think that the thing here is, what makes the big splash, what gets over Twitter, what's all in front of the public is the idea of obviously players changing teams. But something that you've been really banging the drum on since the beginning is the real importance there is obviously the retention side of things. And obviously there's an element of that stays behind closed doors. But that seems to be, at least from my perspective, and Ohio State is a prime example of this, of how important retention can be. And This is an area where I feel like Sark and his group has really excelled.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been watching this show called The Last Kingdom, and it's absolutely fantastic. I actually watched the series. I get like an hour and a half, 2 hours to watch TV at night, like 9, 11 and bedtime. And I've just been running through this show. And a lot of it has reminded me of NIL, because the first thing you have to do is guard your own fortress. And you'll see a lot of these attacks that go sideways, or they'll want the fortress and they'll get goaded out to fight in the open ground, and then they'll lose the fortress. So you've got to protect your home court first. That's rule number one. Don't get overextended. And by overextended, I mean you could go pay above market for a player to get them there, well, you're going to lose some of your own good players. So the
Sure.
first thing Texas did this week was make sure they could lock up the guys that they could not afford to lose no matter what. And then you've also got to be, you've also got to play some hardball too from time to time. You got to be able to take a sword to the arm or catch some scars. And they've not been afraid to do that. But yeah, retention has always been the most important aspect of this. You've got to keep your good homegrown players. It's no different than any other than the pro franchises. Look at how big it was to get Tavondre Sweat back.
Sure.
He wins an Outland. You get Janae Barron back. He wins the Thorpe. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than this. Alfred Collins was massive. You've got to protect home court. Texas has been great at it. And Ohio State's likely about to win a national championship because they didn't even keep not only keeping guys out of the portal, but keeping them out of the draft.
I think too, those players that you just described, and Sark has been talking about this a lot, is just the key importance to development. And I know we talk about that a lot, right? And we just kind of take it for granted, right? These are high school kids. They're going to come to a college program, get bigger, get faster, get stronger, get better, and then potentially maybe have a hope at going to the NFL. But for a long time, one of the knocks on certain coaches would be that they didn't necessarily develop. They just recruited really good kids and, wished for the best, for lack of a better expression. And I think now what you're seeing, especially those pro-minded kids, and I don't know how you wouldn't be pro-minded when you're being offered this level of money, are looking at it as like, okay, I need to go to a place that is not only going to pay me, but I'm also going to become a better football player as a result of that. And I think that's one of the things that you're going to see to start separating some of those programs, especially when you get into a fixed budget for some of these things.
Yeah, well, the mental evaluation is always going to be number one in recruiting. You got to get guys that are going to stay hungry and realize that this is just one step on the way to the much bigger picture. It's really, the second contract in the NFL should be the goal. And the guys that they're recruiting are good enough to actually have that in their mind. And some of them do have a professional mindset. I think that professional mindset is getting has hit players at an earlier age. You talk about 15-year-olds having a trainer. Now some of that is overdone,
right?
And some of those kids have no shot at ever making it to the pros. I feel bad.
Well, statistically speaking, they don't. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Even the good ones don't have a great statistical chance. But there's a number of them. The guys that Texas are going after are really, it's just don't get hurt and you're going to be in the NFL. That's how good they're recruiting right now. But yeah, development has always been important. I was talking to somebody, I was not too long ago, and they said, well, what's different about Texas? So they're recruiting at extremely high level. They've always recruited at a high level. Well, first of all, they have not always recruited this high of a level. That's not true. But then, of course, that Texas was always missing that second component of development. And we're seeing that. I wrote an article yesterday. It's free over on InsideTexas.com. Go bookmark that homepage. We have a lot of free content. We'd love for you to sign up, but just go read too. About the number of 3-and-out players that they've had, 5 last year, and then it'll be 5 again this year, assuming that Jaden Blue gets drafted, which I'm pretty sure he will. So they're developing at a very high rate. It's not all 5 stars that went. Byron Murphy was underrated. A couple other 3 stars. Jonathan Brooks was underrated. But yeah, development is the other part of it. And part of evaluation, you got to make sure you got the pieces that can develop not only physically but also mentally. They're going to stay hungry and locked in. And I think they do have a group of hungry guys. Every time you get 100 people around each other, there's going to be some divas in there. There's going to be some a-holes, some bad attitudes. But they actually do a good job of exiling those guys as well.
So with all of this, and I know that this is coming off of a recent conversation you had, and obviously also the timing of just how the winter window is closed. But with all this, and obviously we're hearing from some very smart people giving us their insight into what they want to have happen. But I think the next question is, first of all, when do you think this could happen? Do you think this is going to carry through, or is this all going to get kicked off when the decision in court is made with the fixed? Sorry,
the House. Yeah, the House.
Yeah, the House. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that's going to make immediate changes and I think a lot of what's going to happen is going to be unforeseen because it's my understanding that it's up to the school to decide what they're going to do with that money. Those schools are going to decide how they want to do it. And kind of goes into a conversation I had, and they're like, well, how do you even break it up? Let's say you use half of that for football. How do you even break that up? Do you go for the marquee player, or do you understand football at a higher level and say we need some offensive linemen and maybe they aren't the most marquee guys, but they make it much easier to win.
Yeah. Or do you go for just a flat rate across the board and then supplement those kids with NIL?
Yeah. Do you try to turn it into a stipend across the board, and then the bigger stars get the fair market value deals? Colin Simmons is never going to hurt for money. All he has to do is, go smile for a company in Austin, and he's going to be okay. Yeah. And schools are still trying to figure that out. And this is going to be one of those things where there's going to be a lot of trial and error. And then you got, Title IX considerations. That's going to go to, that'll be in court for a while. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how it's going to play out. They would like uniform budgeting across the board as well. I don't know. Some people think that all this stuff is quicker on the horizon to be resolved, and others think it's going to be, going to kick the can down the road and be tied into much larger legislation.
I'm just asking your opinion here as we go through this, but to me, if you are of the mindset that either you don't think that legislation is going to kick in, or you don't want legislation to kick in, to me, the next port of call there is ostensibly a super league, right? You join groups together in a collective of, league commissioners, and you form, you start judging, you're regulating yourself. I mean, what do you think the possibility of that is?
Well, I mean, so that's the whole other can of worms. Worms aren't even big enough to describe it. Now you're bringing in private equity, because they would help get it off the ground, and those guys are sharks. And you a whole new layer of lawyers, and you bring in more politicians, because a 60-team playoff is more likely to be popular with states that have state schools like Oklahoma and Oklahoma State fighting, right? Oklahoma is in on a 30 team, but they're not. Oklahoma State's not in on a 30 team. We saw how it was when Texas left the Big 12, and all the state schools were ticked off. Yeah. So that's going to be probably more politically viable. It's like, you pull one string and the whole thing starts unraveling. It's a hard thing to parse through, and I don't know what's going to be the catalyst to really get it going, but you can see why with all these different issues, it's probably going to require some sort of federal legislation.
I want to keep going with this, and please go ahead and send us your questions if you have any. And we're just obviously going to open this up. If you got any questions on the program that you think Eric or I can help you with, go ahead and throw those in. But before we do, I want to hear from one of our favorite sponsors. This video is brought to you by Luxe Kitchen and Bath. Luxe has been offering high-end kitchen and bathroom remodels for 3 generations throughout the greater Austin area. With 5-star review after 5-star review on Google and Facebook, and an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, you can put your faith in Luxe Kitchen and Bath's award-winning designers and skilled craftspeople to bring to life that dream vision of your special home. But that's not all. Luxe's all-star team provides full remodels, large additions, and even commercial build-outs as well. So call Luxe Kitchen and Bath at 833-358-LUXE today. Or visit luxekitchenbath.com to discover where quality meets luxury and begin the process of transforming your home. Get a free quote today by calling 833-358-LUXE. That's LUXE. Or by visiting luxekitchenbath.com. Link in the description. Just pulling at this metaphorical string of Christmas lights here a little bit. We've got next year's SEC schedule is basically the reverse of this year's schedule, right? In terms of home and aways. And they have given themselves a little bit of a cushion, saying like, all right, we're going to do 2 years of this and then make a decision. Surely what happens in terms of some of the calendar, maybe in terms of some of these league alignments and stuff like that, may affect that as well. I mean, do you see, how deep does this go? Does this just go down to the very core of what college football is, and that's why this is so important right now?
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know what I think they're going to go to a nine team conference schedule. That'll change. But really, as far as portal and all this, I think they need to advance the season forward and finish it sooner. They should be finishing like the first week of January, like old, if they have to move it sooner, and have less games probably. But I don't know how that's all tied in. Maybe I misunderstood your question.
No, it's okay. I think what I'm thinking here is just because, one of the articles that was on InsideTexas.com, not maybe a week ago, was, our very own Justin Wells was talking about the season itself being too long, right? We're now interfering with And he took it from an academic point of view, like how this bleeds into that and all the points that you just recently brought up about
too
if
many
he
injuries
does want to transfer, right? Yeah.
And too many injuries too. They've got one star player at Texas has like 4 legitimate diagnosable injuries he was playing through. Guys are too banged up, and they're getting paid now. That's BS. Give me a break, man. These guys are still 18, 19, 20. And when you say they're getting paid, no, not all of them are getting paid. Not everybody on at Texas is making money. So that's a cop out. I don't agree with that. Now the schedule, it is too long. It's too long for the players. It's too long for the coaches. And there's a reason that coaches are looking to go pro, or head coaches are looking to take a coordinator role, or head coaches are looking to retire early. The greatest coach of all time retired before he was ready to, just specifically because of this climate.
Right.
It's all too much too soon. I think they've done. It's too much going on at once. It's chaos. I mean, I know Nietzsche said, "From chaos comes order." I'm ready for some order.
Well, I wouldn't hold your breath on that. I don't see that coming anytime soon. I want to go over here. This is just, again, sticking with transfer portal, NIL, all this stuff. Why not talk about a little bit of recruiting here? So I'm going to read this out from Antonio. It said, do you think that they can land both Felix Joe, is it Oho?
Yeah.
Turntine and Max Wright?
I don't think they will. No, but I think they've got an excellent chance to get Turntine and Wright. We'll see on Felix. There's a number of good offensive line targets right now. They've had, Kyle Flood always does a great job of putting together his big board. And then it kind of comes down to, all right, well, what are the NIL ramifications? Because, the big boys are expensive. Last year, he took a class that you would call affordable, to put it mildly. 2023 was affordable, to put it mildly. 2022 was very expensive.
Right. Yeah.
And what was it? 2024, you got Brandon Baker, and you get a kid out of modern day. You beat Oregon for, you can do the math on that. So he's probably back on a cycle where they're going to go pretty hard. And Turntine, of course, you can have the best people in the world and not, they're not necessarily asking for it. It's going to be offered to them. Turntine will be one of those guys. I think they're going to have a good offensive line class. It would be almost impossible for them not to. But I could see them getting Turntine and Max Wright from that list.
Do you get a sense that, and obviously these things shift really easily. I don't have the intestinal fortitude for recruiting, but even with like transfer portal stuff, you've made it clear that you think some of our biggest needs, and what I'm talking about there is obviously D tackle, and maybe the running back room will have to be solved in the spring if there's anything available. What is the sense, if any, from the staff, that there'll be some people available then, or they just
they feel like there's going to be bodies. We were talking about they almost lost a high profile player this week, and I said, well, what happens if this guy goes? It's like, we'll get somebody in the spring. They're very patient and very confident in what they can get. D tackle, they still need another one. I like the first 2 guys they got, but they need another one. And you still want some of the good things about this spring portal shopping is the fact that those guys won't be in spring ball. Now, that's not great for them necessarily, but it's good for the young talent that they've got that they need to develop. They need to develop these young wide receivers, and I consider Dalen McCutcheon in that group too. Jamie French, of course, and Khalil Lockett. They got to get those guys reps. The running backs, they told all the skill players, hey, hurry up and get in here and bust your ass, because there's playing time available. We're going to play you if you're ready, whether that's special teams or getting real carries. So, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say pressure on the skill players, but there's a lot of understanding that the roster needs you. If you step up and are ready, you're going to play. At the same time, they've got to be aggressive in the spring because they do need more depth and more experience. And, they feel like, it's a championship window the next 2 years, and they've got to go big.
Well, and they're just going to go to UT parking here. He said, I heard that Kojo had a shot to win the right tackle job. Is there any truth to that? I mean, obviously, we're a little bit early still in this development, but what are your thoughts on that?
I would put my money on Brandon Baker if they don't bring in anybody out of the portal. I would not rule out an offensive tackle and an offensive guard being added to the mix. I'm not saying it will, but I could see it happening. They don't want to really leave anything to chance. And I think Kojo and Baker might be a year early for each of them. Baker's just a redshirt freshman, or did he redshirt? He's a freshman. It doesn't really matter with him. He won't be there 5 years. But Baker moves like Kelvin Banks and is a hard worker. I tend to think that he'll win it. But Kojo's got more mass, more time in the program. it's going to be competition. I think Baker would be the guy I would pencil in now, but also wouldn't rule out somebody coming in, an experienced player that has 1 year in the spring window.
For those of you that are just kind of joining us, and as we've been talking about the program and transfer portal and some of the legislative things that may or may not happen, you may have heard Eric mention that they're looking at this as a 2-year window. Eric, is there any particular reason why it's a 2-year window and maybe not a 3 or 4-year window?
Yeah, Colin Simmons. No, that's actually a good reason to have a very, a lot of excitement around defense. But of course, yeah, Arch Manning, and I do believe he will be a 2-year player. Some people say if he's going to go number 1 next year, he's going to leave. Well, there's probably going to be hype for him to go no matter what, 1 overall. And no GM in his right mind is going to pass on Manning if they're even in the top 10 discussion. But they do care about development. They care more about readiness of going to the NFL and being prepared to hit the ground running, as opposed to running for their lives like you see so many young rookie quarterbacks. And a lot of it has to do with who has that first pick and the organization, the structure, the GM. We've seen the Mannings in the past. It infuriated me in real time when they did refuse to go to San Diego and massage their way to New York. Maybe that could happen again. I could see that, but I really think they're going to bide their time, make sure he's ready, and make sure that the landscape is good for him to go to a good organization. Or maybe it's not a team that they want to go to that has the top pick, but they know a team is going to be motivated to move up and get them. I think they're going to want assurances. They don't really fly blindly. They have very well thought out process for pretty much everything they do.
We talked a lot about some of the reasons we're getting able to recruit good players. Obviously, our infrastructure with NIL, certainly the university itself, and obviously the development aspect of it. I'm just curious, in your opinion, how much does an Arch Manning move the needle for some of these recruits, or is it just kind of them focused on their own development?
I mean, it's definitely a plus. It's a plus. Well, first, it's a plus because he's good. Second, it's a plus because the popularity that he's had. Tech's about to have more hype than we've ever seen for pretty much any program.
Sure.
Especially when they'll probably be preseason 1 or 2. Whether or not that's deserved, we're not sure, but they're going to be good enough to be in that conversation. And then you're going to have Arch in it, and then you also got 2 of the highest profile defensive players in the country.
You got Andy Hill. Yeah, absolutely.
Hill, Simmons. So there's going to be the hype machine is going to be absurd. But also, people are going to follow their own financial incentives, and some people need the money more than others. And if the difference is significant enough, you're going to say, well, it would have been nice to play with Arch, but I need to go here. They've got a good quarterback too. So that's definitely part of it. Here's a question that's tangential to quarterback play, if you want to read it out.
Yes. The answer is,
let me see both of your hands.
It's like you're the dad, like locking the door, and I'm trying to get the handle up. All right, don't touch it, Eric. All right, cool. Anton is asking, will UT shift back towards recruiting in-state QBs? Sims, Applewhite, Casey Thompson, and Arch are all the only non-Texans to start in the last 30 years. So this I think obviously bleeds into some of Sark's preferences in terms of what type of player he wants, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Just go get the best player you can. Yeah, just go get the best player. Nobody in the right mind would have not gone after Arch for whoever the in-state quarterback was in Texas. And then you got Diabell in the 2026 class, who reminds me a lot of Arch, frankly. And KJ Lacey, they just took from out. Just go get the best guy, the best fit. The in-state, talking about legislation, the state borders are good for laws and rules and all that, but they're artificial constraints when it comes to recruiting. Go get the best players you can. If they're right in the neighborhood, that's great. It's going to get a lot easier. We call it the proximity advantage, is a real thing. That'd be nice. But just go get the guys that you think are going to be the best to lead your program.
As we move through here with this, so we've gone through our winter window. We've got kids on campus now. What do the next 8 to 12 weeks look like for the program?
Workouts. You've got the freshmen are already working out, the new arrivals. They hit weights yesterday for the first time, conditioning for the first time. They'll bring them along slowly, make sure that they're doing lifts the right way. You don't want to end up on one of those viral videos of them using the cable machine wrong. You gotta see it, and they got to get an idea how strong they are. They do all the measurements, body composition, height, weight, all that stuff, just so they can get a baseline understanding of where they're at. and then they can measure their progress in a couple months. But right now, it's working out for them. The players from the current team, the previous team, are still out of town, kind of getting some R&R after a very long season, longest season in the history of Texas football. And I think they'll be back on the 27th, or workouts start again on the 27th, and they'll kind of merge the team together. But a lot of the freshmen will be isolated. The ones, Justice Terry will probably be in one of the main groups because he's a freak. But yeah, they're just kind of assimilating the young guys into the program before winter conditioning truly takes off.
I would have to imagine that because of the duration of the schedule, that is going to affect, what they do in these next few weeks and these next few months, obviously with the veteran players that just went through that schedule. I mean, that becomes, that adds up to each other. It becomes cumulative if you're not careful, right? That's why the NFL has those mini programs and mini sessions to give people rest. And as Texas is sitting on the precipice of extended seasons, this is their second year in the semifinals. This is what the expectation is, that they'll carry on into the playoffs. Do you see that in any way changing how the S&C program goes? Because now they have to look at this from a longevity point of view where they didn't necessarily have to look at it that long in the past.
Yeah, they've already been doing that. They, a lot of stuff they did, going into last season was in expectation of a very long season. They know when to dial it up and when to dial it down, and a lot of that has to do with why Stark looks for such a deep team. He wants functional depth across the board. No dead weight. There's very little dead weight. The portal helps you with that too. But yeah, they do take a long approach to it. And that's why you'll see guys in first. Once they get a good lead, he starts emptying out the bench. I think they had one game where 77 players played or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it goes hand in hand with Sark's approach to the season and also strength and conditioning. They definitely dial it up at times and dial it down at times, and they think about it. They're always thinking about protecting the body from injuries.
I want to thank you, Eric, and thank you guys for being here. This is a little pickup on Saturday. We wanted to get the opportunity to talk to you about this stuff as the information became available to us. For the most update stuff, join us at InsideTexas.com. That is where that is our first port of call for all of this information. It's a great community that you can join over there. It's a lot of very smart people talking about Texas football, and we would love for you to join us over there. If you're watching this video on Twitter, it's Twitter, go ahead and like the person or follow the person that you're watching it on. If you're here on YouTube, please like and subscribe. That really does help us as we develop this. We want to, again, thank you so much for being here. Have a great weekend. We're going to have all this content for you coming up next week and certainly on InsideTexas.com. Thanks so much.